Hi, Pontus. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too, Alan. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. We're doing something different today because a lot of Angelina Jordan's fans call her a musical genius. And I think it could be a good idea to take a really deep dive into that and find out what that means and ask some people who are expert in their own fields. And so today we will be speaking with Bart, the law professor, Lutke, the musical scholar, and Adrian, the scientist. And we will be asking each one of those the same two questions. What is your definition of genius? And how would you describe the genius of Angelina Jordan?
Oh yeah, that's a difficult question.
Yeah, they all thought it was a difficult question.
Do you want
Now,
me to answer those as well?
yes, please.
Okay. But we're going to watch a recording you've made with these, so we're not going to invite them live.
I have made the recordings already because you're a very busy working man and I'm retired. And so the best use of your time is for me to make the recordings and for us to keep it nice and concise. And you watch the fruits of my labor.
That's very nice of you. But you do know I'm jealous of you, of your spare time.
I'm jealous of you living in Sweden.
No, I don't think so.
Okay, so Pontus, let's kick it off. What is your definition of what a genius is?
Oh, what a genius is. When I hear the word genius, one person comes to mind, and that's Einstein, of course.
Of course.
But if I have to go deep into the definition of genius, it's a little bit difficult. It has something to do with the brain, of course. I mean, if you're really smart, then you could be considered a genius. I don't know. It's the definition of the word genius for me is also you can be a genius in various departments. I don't know if it's a myth, but they say that Einstein was not very good at school. No.
He was too intelligent to go to school.
But I know that some prodigies have trouble in school because they're easily bored when they're not challenged. And also there's the side effect that very highly intelligent people lack other abilities that we ordinary people have, the emotional side of things. They could be very cold or that there's lacking empathy. Different.
A low level of feels. It's interesting because it is so subjective what a definition of genius is, as we will see within the next hour. And before I made the video, I thought that one of the aspects of being a genius is one, originality.
Okay, yeah.
Two, creativity. But
Sure.
Another aspect of it for me is an ability to connect the dots. In other words, one dot here and one dot there, and there's a connection between them. For example, if there was a scientist 100 years ago and he was sitting in the room and he noticed something vibrating on the other side of the room in a certain way, and he then went on to invent the radio.
Great inventors, they have that ability to take something in one field and connect it to their own field of knowledge and make some kind of new association there.
So, Pontus, let's see what these three experts in their own field have to say. And I put this together. You haven't seen it. The first one we will hear is Bart, the law professor.
And do you think these three people, do you consider them as geniuses, or why are they invited?
I allowed that ambiguity to hang in the title.
Okay, that's good. That's good. Okay, let's go.
Welcome to the podcast. You look very familiar. I remember you from before.
You do?
Yeah,
remarkably, I remember you from before.
Well, my face is seen much too much on YouTube, I'm afraid.
Well, that's true. And we both share a just great love for Angelina Jordan and her artistry and her body of work.
Yeah, don't we just? Now, listen, Bart, we have an interesting concept today. We're going to do Genius Comes in Many Forms, and I have two basic questions for you. One, what is your definition of genius? And the second question will be, how would you describe the genius of Angelina Jordan?
Do you want me to answer that second question before Bart answer it?
Okay. So tell me, Pontus, what is your description of Angelina Jordan's musical genius?
Okay, so now you've put me on the spot because I haven't thought this through. But I guess it has something to do with I think the reason why I'm so fascinated by her musicality is because she's doing something that is genius. I really can't put my finger on what it is, though. When I listen to her, it's like she's doing to that particular song everything that I feel when I hear it for the first time. This is the right way to do it. This is the optimal way to sing this song. This has been the case of so many of her covers and originals as well. So maybe it's something to do with that she has this, in German it's called Fingerspitzgefühl.
Helps me a lot.
She has this ability to her decisions in a way that is really smart and intelligent and really gets the message across and is not too much and is not too little. It's what we in Sweden say lagom. I've been thinking about that a lot, actually, with her decisions, that they are so balanced. Is probably a good word.
I think what you're describing is artistic judgment.
Yeah, she really has that down to the slightest variation.
Yeah.
I think that's also why you can hear her again and never be satisfied. You just want to discover new little nuances.
Yeah.
It would be so interesting to hear her speak about her choices in interpreting songs from a very young age. Like I Put a Spell on You, for instance. Why did she take that route, or why did she wanted to do it that way? I think that's where her genius comes in. And I think, for me, my explanation is she's doing it intuitively.
In 20 years' time, you're not going to ask your daughter why she had a tantrum when she was 4 years old.
I might.
She might not remember.
Wow, those are just great questions. And I'm a law professor, Alan, as you know, and I'm a pretty tough grader. In terms of what genius is, it's a hard thing for me to say somebody's a genius. You got to pretty much distinguish yourself. Not everyone's a genius. I think sometimes that word is used pretty loosely.
Yeah.
Like you say, that guy's a genius, and really it's more of an isolated thought or, inspiration. I think genius is a relative term. Basically, all of us inherently have talents and the ability to enhance those talents on what we're God-given or what we're born with. And I think genius, therefore, requires some objective measure. And I think that a measure for me is there's something fundamentally different or new. So there's got to be a creative force behind the genius. It's not simply virtuosity or expertise, but it's creating something new and building from it. And it's got to be foundational. It's got to be something that can be taken and developed. So I think of genius kind of by looking at individual examples of genius. So with people through history, it's pretty easy to identify for me certain kinds of genius in certain individuals within that particular field. I think because a lot of genius changes the world effectively and in a way that is translatable, that can be built upon. So, for example, I think William Shakespeare is a genius, was a genius in his own time, and certainly he stood the test of time because a lot of our words today come directly from him.
Bart, I love your use of the word foundational in terms of a genius does something foundational which can be built upon. That is a new concept that you're explaining, and it's also something that did not occur to me. I really like that. In other words, it's so original and it's so fundamental that other people can then develop that.
Another thing I would say is genius is inevitably collaborative. because what genius requires is that it be shared. In other words, somebody who has thoughts and even tangible product, if it's not shared in some way, then it's like a tree falling in the forest, but nobody hears the sound. So does it really make the sound? You've got to somehow communicate that. Like Leonardo da Vinci, centuries after his drawings were discovered, people said, well, that's genius. And certainly in his own time, he was a genius in certain ways, but it turns out that he was a genius in a lot of other ways, but nobody knew about it until they discovered his secret thought.
A thought occurred to me. I was talking about Einstein being a genius. And in a lot of those kind of papers that scientists produce and get by their peers, they are always referencing other work that they have built upon. But in the case of Einstein, in one of his theories, the only person he could thank in the paper was the person that was walking right beside him when he had the aha moment, the eureka moment, because it was all brand new. Things he was thinking about. Nobody had thought about those things before him. I thought that was really inspirational.
It's interesting you say that, because I was listening to a podcast about genetics, and they spoke about Mendel, Gregor Mendel, who was an Austrian monk who single-handedly founded the whole field of genetics in 1870s when he did his experimentation with sweet peas, and he crossbred them, and he developed the concept of a dominant gene and a recessive gene. And almost every other field, it's an idea whose time has come where it has been discovered in different parts of the world at the same time. But the field of genetics, he single-handedly instituted the whole field of genetics. He is considered the father of genetics.
Wow. That's brilliant.
It makes me think, Bart, because in the English language we have the expression, an idea whose time has come. But what you're saying in a way is a genius whose idea has come.
Yeah, it's almost like you have to have the right time. What I think of a lot of times is if you look at the ancient history and you think of the wheel was used as a decorative design in a lot of cultures, but it wasn't used as a means of conveying things from point A to point B until much more recently. In other words, but I think probably there were people that did use wheels that way to convey things, but somehow it didn't catch on. It wasn't the right time. You know, he didn't have the culture to support that idea. The idea was too new. So I guess genius in somewhat is you have to be kind of lucky. You got to be born at the right time. But I think there's some genius that's totally is so powerful that it transcends all that. It so grips people's imagination.
Yeah.
And so resonates with them that it just has lasting power.
It's funny that you should give the invention of the wheel as something of genius, because today in the 21st century, we consider that so basic and so commonplace that we could not imagine that the concept really could define a genius 20,000 or 50,000 years ago.
Right. Yeah, I think that's absolutely the case. And I think a more recent example of that we take for granted, and we certainly wouldn't call it genius, is the ability to fluently read. The fact is our brains have the capacity to do things that are surprising. Let me just say another ingredient of genius. We talked about foundation. I would say total immersion in a world that is different from other people's. In other words, a genius is someone who has a second nature, which means that it's so much a part of their being that they don't have to think about it.
Yeah, I think that what he's talking about there is something you could apply definitely to Angelina Jordan, I think.
Yeah, the total immersion.
Yeah, exactly. And I've been thinking about that a little bit. I think even one of our earliest podcast episode, I was talking about a dog running across a stony beach, and a dog can run fast. Nothing stops that dog because the dog is not thinking about I'm going to trip. The dog is just relying on the body making the right choices. Whereas if we would do that, we wouldn't dare to take that chance. I wouldn't trust my body to do the right thing. And I think if you trust your brain to think the right things, then maybe you could immerse yourself in something and just go with the flow and be in the zone. There's a lot of expressions talking about this. And I think that's what really talented artists are doing. They are really getting into the zone, immersing in themselves into their own world. Angelina also have said at numerous points.
And I think part of life and part of being human is, if not the ability, at least the attempt to try and immerse yourself in another person's world. Because that's what people are about and that's what life is about. And if you allow me to stretch the image, if you can imagine the world of the dog, he might be running on the beach on a stony beach, but if his sense of smell is 10,000 times better than a human being, imagine how much he enjoys his food. That's for all you dog owners out there.
Yeah. The dog food. Yeah, that's crazy. And I feel that the expression artist is to be used fairly widely, because a lot of people can go into their version of the creative zone. A lot of athletes can do that. The one I'm thinking of is the golfer, Tiger Woods. He in one interview said when he's doing a really good job at the golf course, he doesn't even remember, because he's in the zone so much, so he can't even remember, how did I get here? That's, to me, is really fascinating, that you can go so deep into another world and just let go of everything and just do the right thing. And I think that is also what she's talking about when she says she goes into a world of beauty when she sings.
I've heard chess players say that when they play chess, they're unaware of time and space and hunger and fatigue. They are so totally immersed in what they're doing. But that's not quite the same as being an international artist where other people can share. Chess is more like an intellectual thing which can be reproduced, but an artiste touches us on a different level.
Yeah, and on a very important level too. Yeah. The arts have been under attack for many years from the governments. There's so much power in the arts that the powers that be are always afraid of somebody coming along and doing something to change people.
By second nature, usually what we mean is it's second nature to that individual. It's not second nature to everyone. Yeah. And I think with a lot of geniuses, they are so immersed in their unique world, and then they can build upon it. So they get exponential growth in what they're doing in a way that nobody else does, because they're living in that world and they're building on it. Yeah. So when we talked about a foundation, I was talking about how that genius is then a foundation for other people to build upon, people that have virtuosity and expertise, and they can learn that complex understanding and skill. But the people that create it, that's a totally different thing. That's genius. And I think the genius is built upon their own foundation and oftentimes there's no limitation. So the other thing I would say is geniuses don't put any limitation on what they do. It's kind of an explosion of creativity that persists over time.
I think you have laid a very great groundwork for answering the second question, which is to talk about the genius of Angelina Jordan. And your definition of what you have just explained will and should just flow naturally into how you define Angelina's genius.
Yes, and without any doubt, I think of Angelina as a genius because that's the way I think about genius. I actually think that Angelina has this second nature from a very, very early age. So probably much like other geniuses, she got a head start on everybody. Think of it as a lawyer, essentially three things you look at in trying to solve a crime, right? There's means, motive, and opportunity. I think with genius and with Angelina in particular, she has the means, her inherent talent is manifest. I think anyone, even if you don't enjoy her music, like some people I know, like my wife, that doesn't particularly enjoy her music.
We must have the same wife.
Yeah. But she acknowledged that Angelina has a lot of talent. She has the means. She has the ability to be on pitch, for example. But there's means, then there's motive. And motive, I think, is, incentive. Why do people do what they do? And I think she has that in abundance. And she certainly has had the opportunity. I'm very excited about her genius because I think she understands the way that humans can create sounds, and she knows how to communicate beyond words. But I really think it comes down to memory. I think she remembers everything, much more so when it comes to sounds and how the human voice and what it can do. And she can put these in various combinations that capture how we feel about things, gleeful or joyful or compassionate or any adjective you want to put it. And she can express any emotion, and she has a fundamental understanding of it. It's also the space between her sound and the rhythm. She communicates beyond words. And I think she'll be the subject of study in the future. She's truly a pioneer. I honestly think that she has such an understanding of how to communicate nonverbal using sound in a way that is unsurpassed and unprecedented. Much of a genius, I think she is.
That's really interesting what he's getting at there, because I start to wonder if she's aware of her abilities or if she's just doing what she feels is right. Do you see the difference?
Yeah, of course I do.
Yeah.
I don't think she's self-conscious in that way. I think she's just doing what she feels is right. And she has a lot of positive encouragement on many levels. And because she's an artist, the type of artist that she doesn't need to do any level of analysis. The art springs naturally from her. It's like going to Yellowstone National Park and Geyser. You see the things springing up naturally from deep inside the earth.
Yeah. But I'm wondering if what Bart is talking about, if he believes that she knows that if I do it like this, then I get this kind of emotion. When he says that she has total control of every nuance and every emotion, I'm not so sure.
No, I think because she is a jazz singer, the nature of jazz is the improvisation. Yeah. And I think she is 99% improvisation and 1% calculation. I think the calculation does not really enter her repertoire.
No. That's a very interesting thing to think about. How is she doing it? That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Well, when I speak to Adrian, you will hear that we almost have a how does she do that moment.
Okay, that's interesting. Let's continue.
That's a very high genius.
I mean, it's really a high bar.
Yeah, I know. Can you give a specific song or a specific moment in a song to illustrate what you were talking about?
Boy, there are so many, Alan. Yeah, I think all of us talk about our first experiences and our most recent experiences. There's a certain bias, in our own thinking. And I think, and I've heard many people talk about Angelina's, how they first became introduced to Angelina and, what currently is going on. So maybe I'll follow that. I was a real fan of I Put a Spell on You. It was inexplainable how she could actually perform it in a way that was beyond my comprehension. It was certainly more interesting than Jay's and anybody else I had heard. And I'm a pretty tough critic.
Put a spell on you because you're mine.
I know you like to do comparison to inform your viewership of the context and really to appreciate Angelina. It's so important to hear everybody else because when you hear Angelina, it's like, oh, wow, she has a better understanding of this song than anyone. I found it impossible that someone that age could actually have the best interpretation of the song. And it was clear to me, and I know a lot of the people were incredulous, like, oh, this has to be a trick or she must have been coached. It was clear to me she was the one doing this. This was not some sort of prodigy. I thought even at 10, she was no longer a prodigy. No, she was a pro and she was a genius in a way that kids aren't. That's the thing. Even it's shocking to me, but then at 13, Bohemian Rhapsody was the second song I heard. And how she sang that song and her interpretation was so much better than the original to me.
Yeah, I know.
Anywhere the wind blows doesn't really matter to me, to me.
Maybe it's important to talk a little bit about the expression prodigy, because not everybody is fluent in English. And maybe you could explain, Alan, what is a prodigy really?
That's like asking me what is a genius.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, but I don't know if there's a sort of a standard definition.
I think the word prodigy doesn't come on its own. I think it comes with the word child.
Okay.
Like a child prodigy. So I think it is someone who shows so much talent at such a young age. The word is precocious. A precocious talent. It's almost like they are ahead of their time. For example, Mozart was a child prodigy. So it's someone who shows an extraordinary talent at a very young age. And the hope and the expectation is that they will grow into that talent and they will be a virtuoso and they will fulfill their potential.
It's interesting that you ask him the question, what song is illustrating what you just said about Angelina?
Oh, I learned that from you.
Okay. If I was to answer that question, I think I would go with My Funny Valentine, because I think that is such a good example of what is part of her genius, is that she can take a song and do the optimal version of it. Like, this is the way it's supposed to sound like. You can forget about all those other great artists that came before her. This is the ultimate. And then, of course, she can expand on that and do it another time and even better.
Maybe the word you just used, optimal, maybe that's a great word to be paired with genius. Like geniuses do optimal things.
Yeah, maybe so. And that song is full of those kind of nuances that you really can't understand. How can you think about doing it like that? And also the rhythm and the flow of it. If you close your eyes, you can almost see a feather going in the wind in some places. It's like she's doing the right thing. She has not only a perfect pitch, but a perfect artistic judgment.
Yeah.
That's what I feel. Yeah.
Do you know what just occurred to me? The relationship between Angelina Jordan and her fans. Her fans are like children waking up a Christmas morning to go look at their gifts underneath the Christmas tree. And she is Father Christmas. Put the gifts underneath the Christmas tree for them to open.
Yeah, that's right. That's that's exactly how it feels.
So it's kind of like taking what somebody else does and making it better in a way that's inexplicable, beyond my comprehension. That's genius. Something that I can't understand. Like, it's kind of a magical thing. It's kind of like magic that's real magic. It's something that I can't explain. It's beyond my comprehension. That's what true genius is to me.
Yeah.
I actually have to say that one of my responses when you gave me this assignment was that I thought, gee, I don't know if I can do this justice because I really can't explain her genius.
You have done it justice.
And we've had many discussions on many subjects that intersect with Angelina Jordan because I think she's of this world and it's everything she does has the spirit of joy in it. And I think, that's the positive genius. Not every genius has that, changes the world for the better, but I think her genius is certainly gives everybody that opportunity.
Bart, you've done great. You have really good use of the English language and you explain yourself to a T.
You said it there that he really is good with words. I'm really jealous of persons that are really fast in catching the right phrase is something I really look up too. That's an ability that I would like to have. I don't have that at all.
I'll tell you a funny story, Pontus. One time I was Zooming with Bart, and as I was Zooming, his wife walked along and she stopped and she turned to me and she said, "Oh, Bart really likes talking." And she said it to me as if it were a warning. But to me, it's a great asset because he's a lawyer and he knows how to use his words to make a certain point and to make a certain impression. And words are like, if you hear a boxer talk, it's the accuracy of the impact.
Yes.
Yeah. And that's how he uses his words. So she may have said it as a warning, but it's actually why we have him on the podcast, because he's so good with the English language.
Yeah, marvelous. Yeah, and in my line of work, I'm working with online marketing. And of course, words are very important there too. Yeah. And there's also the psychological aspect of convincing people that you have to put into account. And that's very interesting. I find that fascinating, that side of it. And there's actually a phenomena when you rhyme, it gives extra weight to what you say, that people actually feel it's more true if you say something that rhymes. And I know that a very famous lawyer used that in the O.J. Simpson trial. It was Cochran.
I think what you're referring to, the rhyming, I think it's called rapping.
Yeah, they were rapping in the courtroom. No, but he famously said, if the glove doesn't fit, you gotta acquit. That is using that psychological effect to your advantage.
I would say that's soul talk. That's almost like jazz inflection. Yeah.
So now we have this new person that you're interviewing.
Luca is a piano teacher, but he really also is a classical music scholar. And I've done a couple of interviews with him already where he is zoned in on specific songs. And I consider Luca to be highly intelligent.
Is he also a chess player?
Yes, he is. And he is better than I am.
But does that have anything to do with IQ?
No. When I speak to Adrian, I refer to sometimes you have a genius chess player who can't even tie their own shoelaces.
Yeah, there's nothing to do with that. It's the same crosswords. If you really want to train your brain, you're not supposed to do crosswords because the only thing you train is doing crosswords. Yeah. But what you can do is learn to tango. Wow. Yeah, because that involves the body and rhythm and everything. So that really trains the brain, I've heard. Well, not only tango, but dancing in general.
It's interesting you should say that, because when you give someone an IQ test, it doesn't necessarily reflect their IQ. It only reflects how good they are in taking the IQ test.
Yeah.
I personally have my own theory that if you really want to expand the brain of a young child, 3, 4, 5 years old, it's a very good moment to make them multilingual. Because at that age, it really expands the brain. Angelina is a wonderful example, but if a child speaks 3 or 4 languages, at that age, the brain is like a sponge. It just takes everything in and it makes all the connections.
Yeah, it's wonderful to witness. I have 2 daughters, 6 and 8. So they're really interesting to see how they can suck up all the knowledge they want. Yeah. Although my oldest daughter, she has trouble reading and doing math. And they're thinking about doing some kind of evaluation if she has dyslexia. Okay, continue with Ludger, shall we?
Nice to see you again, Ludger.
Nice to see you, Alan.
And we have an interesting podcast. We are doing a genius podcast, and we are basically asking 2 very probing questions. 1, tell us, what is your definition of what is a genius?
Okay, this question, of course, is a very tough one to define a genius. So what would be a genius now in connection to art? In any field of art, I would call a genius once the form he makes. In music, of course, it's very difficult. It's a connection between time and form. In architecture, sometimes you have the whole picture of the building in front of you. So you can better judge what the form is. But some argued so that you would have the whole picture of the music from the beginning to the end, like before you, and then you start to make the interpretation. So one part would be like form, and what a genius would have to be is like he makes a really new form. This would be, I think, one point, starting with 1800, where there would be human being would also be called like a creator. Before this time, like God was the creator, but then there came the time when a human artist would be called a creator. So he created now also things and works. This was a new time which the artist has to create something new if he wants to be called a genius. So this would be the second part. You have a form which makes such a deep impression that you would be astonished, which you never saw or heard or felt before. And the second part would be there's something really new in the way the form is filled.
I heard loud and clear what you have just said, but I think a lot of what you have just said also applies to the definition of a genius even outside of arts, whether it be a mathematical genius or a genius in other ways, because if you're talking about seeing the whole picture and originality, I think those are two very, very basic principles of a genius in any and every field.
I saw a documentary once about a mathematical genius, and he was considered a child prodigy, but this was when he was in his late 20s, I think. And he had what the mathematicians that studied his abilities, they said this could be the start of a whole new way of thinking in mathematics. Because what he was doing, he was in his head, he had three-dimensional forms for each number. And it was also the case that if he took two numbers, then the shape in between, that shape was the sum of the two numbers. And so they made him do the numbers in clay to convince them that he was real. He had those images in his head. It was phenomenal.
It's amazing that you give this example, because this is exactly how we view Angelina Jordan. She is creating a whole new art form where a lot of people who listen to her either have a new emotional experience or a new emotional repertoire, or it makes them want to be more benevolent. Yeah. So she is really redefining how art can affect us.
Yeah. This is deep.
This is deep. And this is why, very directly, she is a genius, because she is completely redefining what an art form can do.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And that's why we started this podcast.
Yeah.
To absolutely illustrate that.
Let's continue.
Now, let us talk about the musical genius of Angelina Jordan. How would you describe that?
So concerning a musical genius, you would have two parts, like a composer and the performer. So if we just look on the part of the performer, then there would be a special way to sing, which is an outstanding way and has some sort of direct approach to the listener. This is a thing, I think, which is always to be found in the reaction. Everybody reacts like you start to cry if you listen to Angelina Jordan. What would be the reason that someone starts to cry or to weep? And so here I would say that the way the message is transported by the voice leads to a form of catharsis, weeping and crying, which is normally like in a reaction to a work of art connected to a catharsis. The word found by Aristotle in his tragedy, and this would be the reaction if you have like a feeling which makes you forget your own existence.
Talk about deep.
Yeah, I know.
That's really interesting. And it's also very interesting because he's such a brilliant musician himself.
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
I had a very lighthearted moment with him once, because as soon as I started talking to him, I said, Ludger, I really do consider you a genius. And I said to him, has anyone else ever told you that? And he said, yes, my mother. And I said, every mother thinks their child is a genius.
Yeah, of course. That's really funny.
Which, for you, Lutke, is the clearest and strongest example of Angelina Jordan's genius? Which song and which moment would you say is the clearest and strongest example of what you are just describing from Angelina Jordan? And if you want to give us an over-elaborate demonstration on the piano, then this would be a good moment to do that.
An example for me would be places like in Million Miles, when the voice at the end starts to shriek or maybe cry in a loud way, when she stops the voice. So the way she makes a form ending in many songs is when she does with her voice very special things, like in the ending of I'm Feeling Good, or in the end of Million Miles, or in the end of Suspicious Minds. Or in other words, you can listen, I think, maybe to very many examples where the end, she tries to make a round up with a special way of using her voice. Here we are at the final moments of Feeling Good, where everybody, I would say, is stunned when you hear it for the first time.
And
Singing this slow, she is also connecting to the beginning. And rounding it up in this way. And also calming it down at the same time. Another example is Million Miles, where she also builds like a whole form with the way in which she expresses the text with her voice singing it, especially the phrases, I know I'm never alone and wherever you are. So the first time when she sings it,
I know I'm never alone. I know that I'm never alone, never alone, never alone.
second time,
I know I'm never alone.
adding a lot of expression to it.
I know that I'm never alone.
But even this gets a higher climax when she sings Wherever You Are.
I want all your friends and stars, the songs for you wherever you are. We're a million miles apart.
And you noticed even the piano stopped for a moment at this high point of expression when her voice alone can be heard. Here she sings the line, I know that I'm never alone, for the last time. So rounding the song up in this way.
Now in my heart,
Yeah, bringing
I know that I'm never alone.
the emotional journey to the end and calming it down at the end. So she not only uses her vocal capabilities to express the text in varying vocal inflection or making her famous runs, but also underlining the form as a whole. Here's an example how she transforms a song when she covers it. Yeah, here's the text line is, I'm caught in a trap.
We're caught in a trap. I can't walk out.
Yeah, and the music stops, the voice together with the piano accompaniment, like the movement is stopped and there's no way out, you are caught in a trap.
Oh, that's brilliant. That's brilliant.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's something I would never have realized. And he makes another point in another minute or two. And when he said rounded up, I understand what he means is the way the musical composition is resolved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's how I understand what he's saying.
Yeah, I heard somebody comment also that the ending of Million Miles is the feeling you get when you experience loss. It's like it's something missing. That's brilliant. And I think also what he's pointing out here is so interesting. And like the feeling good, I think she's an expert in build up. She has that really good sense of how to build it slowly up. And then at the climax, she doesn't overdo it, which would be so easy to do if you're not careful to overdo it. But she just puts it just right, I think.
Yeah, if she were a chef, she would never burn anything.
No, she would never have too much salt in it.
No.
Also in this song, there's another good example for how she connects the end of the song to the beginning of the song, rounding it up. In the beginning, there's a piano introduction, starting in the high register of the piano, then going down to the lower register, and ending now on a very dark chord. Also, she appears in black. This black and white has, of course, a special meaning in this song. And at the end of the song, the same piano is used now as an outro. So the introduction is repeated at the end of the song, but stays in the high register.
Here, when he said he make it a round form, I'm interpreting this as it's like a loop. It's like beginning is the same as the end, which is very fascinating too.
Yeah, I think there's a musical term for that. I think it's coda, where you play the first bit and then you return to the first bit. So maybe that's what he's referring to.
Yeah, just basically amateurs here. You and I mean,
I wish we were that good that we could be amateurs.
What's lower than amateur?
We're a novice.
And by the way, with the last tone and the bass now, this crystal falls down exactly with boom.
Give us a piano example of what you have just been describing.
Yes, I will try to do so.
I love it when you just order a piano example.
But he speaks English, he speaks German, and he speaks piano. And I think of the three languages, probably piano is his best language.
Yeah, that's true. It's so great.
So this was be like an example where I tried to make a big build up and then try to find a good way, like with a cadenza like thing at the end, to make a big moment of expression at the end, and then to calm down with like which would be called in a classical music piece a coda at the end, which would round up the end of the piece, which I find in a different way, but this is what I find in many songs, in her reworking, reshaping of the songs, when she especially finds a different end than in the normal song. One last thing I wanted to mention, she often sings special words of the song, important words of the song, in changing very much the inflection of her voice. I noticed this with the word I in Suspicious Minds and All I Ask. So here's the first example.
Would I still see suspicion in your eyes?
Yes, when she sings in your eyes, there's a great change of a big change of the way she sings the words, and there's an even greater change in All I Ask.
I don't need your honesty. It's already in your eyes.
Yes, here's even a greater breakup of the voice. So this is the eye in the traditional interpretation, like the window into the soul, where you can look into the soul.
I mean, wow, he could start his own channel.
Yeah, I know. This to me is why he is a genius, because in 1,000 years, I would never make that connection.
No. But I know there was two people commenting on one of my reactions, and they were having a discussion. And actually, Adrian was one of them. And they were talking about their favorite moments. And they were just pointing out stuff like this, like Ludger said, stuff like, oh, listen how she says that word in that song. That's brilliant. And that thread, I didn't comment. I just watched it quiet, spying on them, because I wanted to see where are they going with this. And this comment was like 90 or so comments in that thread. And they even said that, should we take this conversation somewhere else? Because it's difficult to scroll down to the latest comment. And then I thought, maybe I should do a video of their comments and putting that like Ludger does here, like showing it in the video. I think that would be a great video. I think a lot of this video that you have done with these interviews could be the basis of a video in itself. I'm not going to be able to sleep tonight at all, I'm afraid. I will just have different...
Now that you've seen it once, I will give you permission to see it a second time, okay?
Yeah, uninterrupted then.
Okay.
Another place from All I Ask is the way in which she sings the word don't.
And since you're the only one that matters, tell me who to run to down.
Here the voice is nearly falling apart when she sings the don't. So like the whole song in one word and one run.
I think some of these things are picked up unconsciously in cases of this pronunciation of I's or doing runs on specific words that are meaningful. I think actually there she is taking a deliberate control of where should I put the emphasis, and she knows this is important and she does a run there. But I think that most of us are just picking up on it unconsciously. And I think that's maybe why we start crying and being so emotional, because we're not thinking, we're just experiencing it unconsciously.
There's a famous American poet called Robert Frost, and he was asked once about the meaning of his poem, a specific poem, and he said, oh, go and read it again. And then the person came back and asked him again, and he said, oh, go and read it again. If we were to speak to Angelina and we asked her, why did you make this choice at this moment in this song? She would say, oh, go and listen to it again.
Yeah. My father was a painter, and he didn't like to explain his paintings. They were abstract paintings, and people often said at galleries, what did you think and why did you... And he just wanted people to just experience it like he was doing. And actually what he was doing all his life was trying to replicate a vision that he had at age 3 or 4, which was like an artistic revelation or vision. And so he was just looking for that image again.
Yeah, and some prophets will have revelations, and those revelations can almost be the basis of a whole new religion. Some people have certain moments in their life. I remember I was 6 years old. We were sitting at the dinner table, something was said, and my father raised his left eyebrow. I don't remember what was said, but I remember that moment for the rest of my life.
Yeah.
These are like ripples in a pond.